It's very fucking cold. Hello, welcome back to the Coleman channel, and welcome back to yet another tube review. We're back to a regular feature, ladies and gentlemen. Can you fricking believe it? It's time for another review, and today's review is going to be on the very recent release of BBC British Broadcasting Company docudrama series titled simply The Reckoning. The Reckoning. Yes, you probably might not be in the know of The Reckoning if you're outside of the UK, potentially. I'm turning my light up. But if you don't know about The Reckoning, I recommend that you watch it. I'm just going to get a spoiler-free review of the way. I thought it was pretty damn good. Well, not pretty damn good. It was pretty good. It wasn't like fucking blow your nuts off amazing. It was quite... it was interesting. It was a thing worth making, I think, because it's obviously chronicling the life and times of a one Jimmy Savile, who, if you don't know who that is, once upon a time in the throughout the 60s up to or maybe the 80s, was like a national institution over here in the United Kingdom. He was a TV presenter, disc jockey, did a bunch of shows like Top of the Pops and Jim will Fix It and all this shit, you know, and a charity worker who just raised millions of pounds for different kind of institutions like hospitals and all this shit. Was a volunteer porter, and, you know, just a general seemingly nice man, and also a very eccentric dude who would always wear big shiny puffer suits and smoke cigars and all this shit. And then of course in 2011 he passed away, and it was understood that he was a sex offender. He'd done some very horrifying, devious things throughout his entire fucking career. From minors to the elderly, taking advantage of many vulnerable people all across the board and all the different places he went to, because he just had infinite access to anywhere. And he could manipulate people, and he had friends in high places like the Prime Minister, the Prince of Wales, and the Pope. So yeah, this man pretty much inserted himself into everywhere, and basically could do whatever the fuck he wanted, and therefore he done some horrifying things in plain sight, because basically he kind of fell off and everyone kind of just thought he was a bit of a creep because he acted like a creep his entire life, but no one gave a fuck because he just seemed to be a nice little man, a little weirdo, Jimmy Savile. Not a nice man. Horrifying stuff. Basically got away scot-free up until the very end, until the year after he died, and then it all came out. And it's been recently, 10 years later, that a lot of kind of documentaries and stuff like that have come out about him, about the details of his life and how he managed to go under the radar for so long. Well, I say under the radar. Like I said, he acted like a creep his entire fucking life, but how he was able to get away with this stuff, do horrifying things to innocent people, innocent vulnerable people, while keeping up a smokescreen of eccentricity and charm and smarm, and getting in with the big boys and all that kind of shit, all while carefully veiling himself, while also giving very unsubtle hints of the fact that he is a fucking deviant. Yeah, he's a very fucked up, however interesting character. If you don't know about him, you should look into him and read up about it, and watch The Reckoning, which is a docudrama about him, and basically examining how he managed to get away with it for so fucking long in plain sight. Very interesting stuff. Like I've said before on this channel and other reviews, I think specifically like Ed Wood, I've kind of had a newfound love for docudrama and for biopics and stuff, kind of like visual media acted out depicting like non-fictional events. Is something that I'm actually very interested in, and something that I would pursue. I would love to do something like that, and I've got very specific ways of how I'd want to pursue it, and that's why I'd like to talk about The Reckoning, because it kind of follows those kind of guidelines that I think are very important when it comes to documenting non-fictional events encased in an acted out scenario. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, it's a very specific type of of drama, I suppose, and whatever else. And it's very delicate in how you pursue it, especially with something like The Reckoning, where it's very much about a fucking horrible man who did fucking horrible things throughout his entire career, which is a very long career, like spanning over 6 decades or something like that. Fucking hell. But yeah, I thought The Reckoning was pretty good. 4 episodes long, 50 minutes each. It's very, very long. And yeah, basically, if you don't know about him and the life of fucking Savile, and then it will basically break it down for you pretty succinctly. It carries you through all the major events in his life, from being a DJ to hosting Top of the Pops to hosting Jim Will Fix It. You know, just the whole rigmarole of his life and how he managed to insert himself in, and how he managed to gain access to places that he really should not have had access to. And the way he went about it, and depicting very real events of victims and stuff like that, and the shit he did, and how he managed to get away with it for so long. That's basically the long and short of what it is. It's very simple in its premise, and executed, I think, pretty good. You know, it's pretty textbook BBC docudrama in a way it does it, which is something that I quite like, and how it tackles the issue, tackles the events, while encasing it in a scenario that is acted out on a set with studios and all this kind of shit, while basically mixing fact with some fiction, but making it very, very clear what the message is, what the purpose of the docudrama is, how it's going to pursue it, and the steps it's taking in order to create a narrative through line, you know, because obviously the thing is with fictional stuff, fictional drama, comedy, or whatever, you can make up the plot and the narrative yourself, and then it follows along. But when you're depicting real events, it's already kind of there for you. But obviously, real life doesn't follow a narrative the way that fiction does. You know what I mean? It just doesn't work like that. So you gotta be able to take non-fictional events and encase it in a plot and a narrative and stuff, and all the while making it very clear the steps are being taken in order to depict it, you know what I mean, instead of just taking the piss and taking a situation and fictionalizing the fuck out of it and making up scenarios and stuff and not making that clear for the audience at all, which I don't think is good. I think you should be making it very clear from the get-go, and it's good that it does that for you. And I'll elaborate on how that happens in the spoilerific review. But yeah, pretty short, sweet, simple, spoiler-free review. I enjoyed it. I think it depicted the situation very well. I think it's pretty succinctly takes you through everything. It nicely boxes up what otherwise is a very long spanning career. It does miss some pretty integral parts that I thought should have been in it. If you've watched, there's an actual documentary, not a it's a proper documentary called I think British Horror Story, which kind of delves into pretty much everything that this docudrama delves into, but obviously in more detail. And yeah, there's some bits and pieces from that documentary I think should have been covered in this docudrama, which it didn't. But you know, does it change anything that the fact it's left out? Not really, but I think it would have hit home a lot more, and I think made the point got the point across a lot more, because there's obviously this narrative that goes through it, and it is effectively a rise and fall story of a fucking horrible man. And there's a lot of these points throughout his life that I think really get the point across in those different aspects of his life. You know what I mean? Does that make sense? It also does a very good job in laying out the intention, or the purported intention of what Jimmy Savile was all about, and the way he was going about the horrible things he was doing, inversely the supposedly great things he was doing, you know what I mean, and the way he was getting friends in high places and basically just doing things that basically no one should have been doing, like just all access to fucking hospitals and shit, and advising the fucking prince and the prime minister and all this fucking insane shit, and running a psychiatric hospital when I had like clearly no qualifications to do so, purely just because of he seemed to get things done and people seemed to like him. It's kind of fucking mind-boggling to think that someone could get access like this, and just basically have free reign over the country is pretty nuts. Obviously, growing up for me, you know, I'm 25, born in '98. I did not know who the fuck Jimmy Savile was until he died and everything came out about him. Because at that point in time, he kind of just faded into obscurity, purposefully, I think, because at that point in time, as standards and practices were changing in the BBC, which he worked with and all this kind of stuff, and just television in general, I think people kind of started to get the idea that he was very much a not very well-hidden secret in terms of the way he behaved with people and all that kind of stuff, and with women and all that kind of shit. So he kind of got brushed under the rug while he was still alive, and all his meteoric fame kind of just piddled away. And yeah, I certainly had no idea who the fuck he was, and I don't think a lot of people in my generation would have known who he was until he passed away, and then everything came out about him, and he just kind of became a bad joke on the playground. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, so that's like the only perspective I have of him and had of him until this other, you know, until your, you know, maybe your mum and dad of that generation may have talked about him. I wrote a letter to Jim will fix it, you know what I mean? Or until these documentaries came out and this docudrama came out. So yes, I think it's good that it's coming out now, like a decade later, after everything's been said and done, that people can get a proper perspective on the whole thing. Particularly people who may not have had any idea who the fuck he was until his death, and they can get a better picture of everything that he did and how he did it. And I think The Reckoning does a pretty good job of doing that. In terms of like performances and stuff, I think it was all done quite well. Obviously the lead was the most interesting part of the whole thing. Being able to play a man like that takes a level of talent, I think, particularly the kind of guy that fucking Jimmy Savile was, you know what I mean, in terms of the way he looked, the way he spoke, the way he behaved. But yeah, we'll get all that in the spoilerific review, which I think we'll start here. That's what I'll say about The Reckoning if you've not seen it yet. I recommend you go and see it to get a perspective on this guy. Like I said, it's a docudrama. It examines how he got away with all he did, and it's told very succinctly. There isn't a lot of bullshit padding or anything like that, and if there is any in it, it makes it very clear from the get-go before you start that some parts are fictionalized and some characters are made up for the purpose of the narrative, but otherwise everything else is factual. It all happened, and it all makes it very clear, which is very important for any kind of thing like this. Yes, so you should go watch it. I thought it was pretty good. I enjoyed it. In terms of spoilerific stuff, yeah, the performance. Steve fucking Coogan plays Jimmy fucking Savile, which is an interesting choice. A very interesting choice, because if you don't know who Steve Coogan is, he's like another British comedy icon, because he plays Alan Partridge, who I think a lot of people already know who that is. The thing with Alan Partridge is like it's very, very, very difficult to divorce the fictional Alan Partridge from the non-fictional Steve Coogan, because Alan Partridge has been around for so fucking long, you know, from the Day to Day to I'm Alan Partridge, Mid-Morning Matters, This Time with Alan Partridge. You know, he's been all over the place, and he's been in films, he's been in shows, he's been in podcasts, he's been in audiobooks, and the Alan Partridge character very much appears in non-fictional scenarios as well. He always appears at book signings. He appears on like talk shows and stuff in character. So yeah, these two, this non-fictional and this fictional person, this non-fictional person and this fictional character are very hard to like divorce from each other because they're just so prevalent. I definitely think Alan Partridge is more well known maybe than Steve Coogan is, even though they're the same person. And Alan Partridge is written by and portrayed by Coogan. I don't know, it's just hard to divorce those two. So when you see Steve Coogan portraying this character, this horrible person, in this very serious docudrama, it kind of throws you a little bit, because you just see Alan Partridge in a long blonde wig with very silly hair. And yeah, you know, Steve Coogan's a very specific, you could pick him out. He's a very specific looking dude, I think, with the big nose and the kind of piercing eyes and the long chin, you know what I mean? So it's hard to kind of take away divorce these, no fault of Steve Coogan, obviously. It's just kind of the way it is when you portray a character like that, like Alan Partridge, for so fucking long, and he becomes so in your face and everyone knows who it is. It's just very hard to divorce that from playing a sexual fucking deviant. But I think he does a very good job, honestly. I think he gets the mannerisms down, all the fucking quotes, the oh to the now then, and the fucking stupid walk and all this nonsense. And while he looks not a lot like Savile face-wise, I think there are a lot of moments where he gets it down, especially as he gets older, especially when he starts wearing the specs, those fucking stupid spectacles he used to wear. He does look a lot like him in a lot of places, and a lot of places he doesn't. It's mostly during the early years, and then as it gets on, it looks a lot better, and he looks a lot more like the person. Another thing I think is worth talking about actually is like the makeup is really fucking well done, because obviously it takes place over the span of a few decades, like 5-6 decades. So a lot of the characters, Jimmy Savile and the people that he associates with at the BBC, at the hospitals, and all this kind of stuff, as they get older, they look like they've gotten older, and the makeup is applied very, very well. It just looks very natural. It looks like they have aged, and it's no fucking like digital de-aging nonsense. This isn't the Irishman or anything like that. They just actually gradually apply makeup, and it looks very convincing, and they do look older, which is very well done, I think. I really appreciate how every episode from the get-go immediately tells you at the start what the drama's about, how it's going to tackle how Savile got where he was and how he managed to hide in plain sight. It opens up with interviews with victims in every episode, and I think it bookmarks as well, at least in the last episode it did, with interviews from victims. It's basically like only 4 people, but I mean there was like 400 cases, I believe 300 or 400 cases that were called in by the end of the big investigation. So these are, I think the people that they had in, to be fair, were the ones that are depicted in the drama, so it makes sense that they're there, whether anonymously, because a lot of names are changed and stuff, because it's a very fucking big deal. But they all appear, they all talk about it. I think some of them appeared in the documentary as well, British Horror Story, so obviously incredibly brave of them to step up and talk about their experience with this fucking British juggernaut who they could not speak out because of the nature of the guy. And yeah, that all gets tackled very succinctly in the drama as well. How he just behaves abhorrently towards women in plain sight, but no one basically ignores it, or doesn't want to believe it, or just thinks it's just Jimmy being Jimmy, Sav being Sav, our Jimmy type beat. And it shows that off very well, and it was very much the case in real life. It just, fuck it, you can't touch him because he's done so much good and all that kind of stuff. And it explores all this sort of stuff, from how he got access to how people just blatantly ignored the red flags, how he basically just let it all out, all these subtle hints throughout the years. Yeah, it brings up all the very important factors in the life of Jimmy Savile, from his career to his his faith as well. He was a very diehard Catholic, which is a very really crazy thing to think about. I had no idea that was a factor in his life until I watched British Horror Story, and it's such an interesting thing, and it explores it very well in the docudrama as well. Like, he was a fervent believer in God, he would attend church and all this kind of stuff. And you really get the idea that the only reason why, and he said it himself in an interview, we hear Steve Coogan say it, it's said in the documentary and archival footage, it's a good gamble, it's worth believing in it. And that's it's the whole juxtaposition of his life. He'd done absolutely terrible, abhorrent things to vulnerable people. But to counteract his sins, he would do these amazingly crazy good things, like raising millions of pounds for charity in a very short time span, run on marathons, make dreams come true on Jim Will Fix It, and all this kind of stuff, and just spread joy, as it were. And that would counteract his horrible things, and he keeps his receipts, you know. And he's talked about this stuff on interviews and stuff, and we see it on the drama, and it's fucking insane to think that's the reason why. Because he basically thought, I've done fucking horrible things. If there is an afterlife, I'm screwed. I need to do some really great things and counteract it. Just horrible, horrible, horrible things, and it just a fucking foul way of thinking about the world, you know what I mean? Just like a get out of jail free card, counteracting all this shit that he's done. Fucking hell. Horrible. Depicted very well in the drama. And obviously, Coogan has to carry this whole thing, and like I said, his performance is good. I think sometimes it can be a little bit, I don't know what it is. I don't know if this is like Coogan's first very serious role, because he's very much typically a comic character actor and writer and whatever. But you know, he does capture the mannerisms and the speaking manner and the way Savile talked with that Leeds accent and all this kind of shit, that very Yorkshireman kind of accent that he has. Because I think Coogan's from the kind of same area anyway, so it makes sense. But I don't know, sometimes it feels a bit flat, I suppose, in some scenes, in terms of the way, like, there's not a lot of urgency or whatever. But maybe that's just him trying to portray the character, I don't know. I mean, you know, for the majority of the time it's really good. I think sometimes it just, I don't know, some moments just kind of catch me and pull me out of it a little bit. Maybe it's just like the oddity of him, of Steve Coogan being Jimmy Savile, that kind of drags you out and you just hear his voice in that. Maybe that's why. I don't know. Like I said, that's the hardest part, is divorcing this Alan Partridge Steve Coogan guy from this very horrible, deviant man that he's depicting. But, you know, he carries it very well, and I think he does a very good job at doing very hard scenes to film, you know, like basically like getting very forceful with women and stuff. He does all this stuff, and that's depicted very well. Very respectfully as well, because it is horrible stuff that he does, and it does this really neat thing where wherever he's in his house, or he's in like a dressing room or anything like that, and the door gets shut behind him and he proceeds to do some bad shit, the camera always pans away from the room or the door even, and you just are left to the imagination, what the fuck is he doing back there? And you know that he's doing not very good things to innocent people, and the way it just kind of pans away from the door and kind of leaves it to the imagination is very effective, very impactful, and very not nice lingering thoughts in your head, essentially. And the camera work in general is actually really good. I'm surprised that the cinematography was like really nice in some places. Like, there's a lot of really nice wide shots of these places in England, like Leeds and Scarborough and all this kind of random shit. Places you wouldn't think ordinarily are very pretty, but look very nice, even though it's like quite grey and windy and British weather. There's a lot of just really nice long shots and wide shots that just look really pretty. And obviously, when they depict scenes from like the first Top of the Pops to Jim Will Fix It and all this kind of shit on the old kind of aspect ratio and stuff from the 60s and 70s is done very, very well. One that I was surprisingly impressed by, I don't know why it is, but it was the depiction of Jimmy Savile appearing on Celebrity Big Brother 2006. I don't know what it is, but it's a scene where he walks in the room and all the people are there and like, oh my god, it's him. And it's like, oh, the white balance is all crazy and the exposure's really bright and all that kind of shit. It did just look like Big Brother. It was very impressive how they managed to match up the camera work on that show, on that kind of reality show, and married it up into this depiction of that scene. I don't know what it was, I just think it was really impressive how they managed to match up these, I guess, these styles and camera work on these types of shows that we saw over the past few decades, and kind of matched up quite well, actually. I thought that was really well done. I don't know why the Big Brother one was so specific, but it was just the white balance and the exposure and all this kind of stuff that is very very Big Brother-esque. I don't watch that shit show, but I know that that's what it looks like. But it just looked like it, and it was really well done in that way. I was impressed by that. But yeah, the most important part for me is the transparency to the audience watching that this is a depiction of real events, and here are the ways that we're going to tackle that, you know what I mean? I think that's kind of a staple with like BBC drama. There was one that I watched that I actually did a paper on for university, which was called Spanish Flu, which depicted the Spanish flu obviously at the end of World War I. and it did the exact same thing in terms of transparency for the audience watching it. Real events, here's how we're tackling it. Some events are not real, some characters are made up for the sake of plot and narrative, but otherwise the events here are documented. There are some sources that we used, and here's how they are. And it does that with The Reckoning as well. Tells you like the source as well, like they based a lot of the events off of the book that was written, which is a big part of the drama as well. And the actor that portrayed the author, I thought was really well done as well. There was a good... They're basically the two most consistent characters in the whole thing, because it's he's trying to write a book about Savile's life, and he basically gets an inkling that he's a fucking deviant. And it ramps up more and more, and then there's like the flashback sequences of him talking about what happened and that from Savile's perspective, which is obviously not true. But yeah, it's a great duel there, again, a back and forth battling it, and as they get older, Savile's kind of front starts to collapse. He can't put it up any longer because he's fading into obscurity, and is basically like an open secret that he's a fucking evil man. Do you know what I mean? Through those conversations, it's kind of all the idiosyncrasies of Savile are kind of revealed as well, like always name dropping the Pope and the Prime Minister, and you know, big pop hit names, because he met all the pop stars like the Beach Boys and the Beatles, and just all up and down the line from that era. It's very up himself, obviously, you know, and it depicts that incredibly well. It's a aura of humbleness, but really it's all cleverly disguised, and it's actually very upfront that he's just very full of himself, and only some people can see it, really. Yeah, very impressive. They show off the individual, the character, incredible well. A lot of great use of archival footage as well, as you'd expect to see. Obviously come up with all the major... they basically kind of pull up as like just to display the big rise, the meteoric rise to fame, in between moments in the story and that kind of thing. I really do think the only thing I would have liked to have seen in terms of, this is more of like a stylistic choice, it would have been quite interesting, is to see the archival clips bleed into the story. You know what I mean? Like, again, bringing up Spanish flu one more time. There are a lot of really great scenes of archival footage after the First World War, like trains with the troops coming home and stuff, and them getting off the train, and then from the archival footage it kind of wipes into the drama, and it's all very fluid, and it all looks like it's just right off of the archival footage. Not really any of that in The Reckoning. Would have been pretty cool to see that, you know, some of the archival footage wipe into the events and the drama unfolding, but it's more just like quick scenes to depict the rise to fame and all this kind of stuff, and meeting these famous people and doing all these insane things, you know what I mean? It would have been, it's just a stylistic choice. It doesn't need to happen, but I think it would have been much punchier to remind you this is all real events and this happened. Even if you're already seeing the archival footage, I think it hammers it home way more when that archival footage of reality bleeds into the dramatized depiction from the set and the actors and stuff. Do you know what I mean? Just brings the point home even further, which is important, I think. Not much else to say, really. The doctored images of Savile with like famous people like Elvis and Muhammad Ali and stuff is really well done, replacing Savile with Steve Coogan, and all of these reenacted scenes from reality with Coogan, or like the Big Brother scene and stuff, are really well done. Really, it was really weird though, because pretty much all these scenes of like real archived footage, whether it's from interviews or from shows or from news segments, are all doctored to have Coogan in it, except from the one scene where his death is announced, where Jimmy Savile was pronounced dead. It's actually his face and not Coogan's. I don't know why they did that, because it wasn't like an archival scene, it was in the drama and they're watching it on the TV. Do you know what I mean? It's really weird. I don't know why that was like the only thing. Is it out of respect? If so, why? And that's all I'm going to say about The Reckoning. I don't know if there's much else for me to say about it. That's all my points and criticisms and stuff. It's just really well done, I think. And really the biggest points I can give it are how it tackles real events, non-fictional events, and makes it clear. It's all very important. It's how I would tackle a docudrama or a biopic or anything depicting real events. It's so important from the get-go to immediately establish this is real events, this is how we're tackling it. Some are fictional, some are non-fictional, documented based on evidence and facts. as well as testimonials and interviews of people that were actually there during the events. Hammers it home even further. So yeah, very, very well done. I liked it a lot. Epic to lame ratio, ladies and gentlemen. Let's slap it on there right freaking now, baby. I think The Reckoning sits pretty snugly and probably high tier, pretty epic. It's pretty well done. It's not the most insane docudrama I've ever seen, not the most insane biopic I've ever seen, but obviously very serious events, very horrifying things happening with a very well-known British institutional man. Well, I say that fallen from grace pretty hard because horrible individual. I think depicted very well. Credit to Steve Coogan. It must be very hard to play a role like that, especially with the kind of comedic man that you're known as and being such an iconic face. I think it's all done very well with great respect to the victims and all that kind of stuff. Just basically showing how we were all duped. Another thing I didn't actually say is like showing the changing times as well, from how you could just basically get away with anything you wanted in the 60s and 70s till the 90s to the noughties, where it's like, okay, no more, fuck off kind of thing. Very well done. Very brave of the BBC to depict this as well, considering they very evidently covered it all up. They did. Even said that in the documentary, which in the docudrama, which I really appreciated how it literally says that, you know, the black text after he died, it was like they showed a big tribute piece to him, and at the same time there was a piece talking about the open secret that he was a deviant, and the BBC axed that in exchange for the tribute piece. So yeah, they fucking covered a lot of this shit up. Open secret in the BBC for many years. But yeah, they showed The Reckoning on the BBC. I watched on iPlayer. So yeah, I mean, fair play for letting that happen on the BBC. It wasn't filmed by the BBC, it was ITV Studios, I think they filmed it in, for the BBC. So yeah, fair enough, I guess. It doesn't necessarily make up for that happening, but you know, the fact that they gave it a platform. I don't know how well advertised it was. I don't know if it was at all. I kind of knew about it because it's been talked about for a little while, and like there's been set photos and stuff. But you know, the point is, worth watching if you don't know much about the Savile story, or if you even do and you'd like to see it depicted. A lot of people just like to see this. There's this like really wanting desire for people to kind of see these events unfold. You know, like horrible event. You know, with like Dahmer and all this kind of stuff, just docudramas and biopics of like horrible things happening. I don't know, there's a weird, eerie desire in the human nature to see these events unfold in some way, and docudramas are really good for that. And I think The Reckoning is definitely a good look into one of the most scandalous, insane and mind-boggling human beings and events surrounding said human being in UK history. Definitely worth a watch, for sure. And that's the tube review for The Reckoning, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the review. Be sure to let me know if you've seen The Reckoning. Do you know much about it? If you've seen any Savile-esque stuff, tell us about it. Comment, like, share around. Feel free to drop a sub. Plant a little seed and let a subscription tree grow. I don't know what the fuck I'm saying, but do it. Much appreciated. Yes. More tube reviews to come. More content coming. All that usual stuff. Yeah, blah 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 blah